Hey, welcome to Astronomy. Pretty cool, right? Hopefully this is working. I'm gonna try a few different things in these first few pre-class videos just to make sure the setup is working properly. Me over some movies, me over some keynotes, me up in the corner, mix things up a little bit so not all the videos look exactly the same. So this is Astronomy in the summer. Astronomy in the summer is a lot faster than astronomy in the regular semester. And to be honest, this is the first time I've done it in the summer. I just finished this last semester doing a late start class, which I think was 10 weeks. And it was hard to take a 16-week class and squish it into 10 weeks. Well, this class I think is only 8 weeks, so it's going to be even harder. Which means that the idea that I can just structure the class the way I usually do and just compress it doesn't really work. So I'm thinking about, for this summer, just doing things completely differently to fit the material to a more natural use of the amount of time that we have. So there are a few different ways to structure an astronomy class. The traditional, I think most often used way to structure an astronomy class is what's sometimes called the inside-out model, where you start talking about the Earth as a planet, and then the Earth and the Moon, and then the solar system, and then all the planets and the solar system as a whole. And then you talk about the sun, then you talk about other stars, then you talk about galaxies, then you talk about the Big Bang and the history of the universe as a whole. So you start small and you move out bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the way I always teach astronomy. There are a few other options. You can go outside in. You can start with the universe as a whole and then talk about the things in the universe, clusters of galaxies and stars and planets, and go the other way. That's not very common. You can start at the Big Bang and do an astronomy class chronologically. This is what happened in the universe when it was a nanosecond old. This is when the first stars and galaxies formed. This is how stars evolved. This is how planetary systems formed. This is the history of our solar system. This is the history of our Earth. So you can do it chronologically. You can also structure an astronomy class in terms of the history of our knowledge and understanding of the universe as humans. So you can start with, what did the ancient Maya and the ancient Egyptians and the ancient China and the ancient Near East, what did they know about the sky? What did the ancient Greeks learn about space? What did we learn in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance? What did Galileo and Copernicus and Newton discover? What do we discover in the 1800s? I don't know why the image behind me is jumping around like that. We'll fix that in another video. What did we learn in the 1800s when we developed better telescopes? What did we learn in the 20th century when we developed photography? What did we learn, what did Hubble learn in the 1920s about the expanding universe? So we can cover our understanding of the universe chronologically and build up our knowledge that way. That is fun for me because you learn not only about astronomy in particular, you learn about the history of science in general, which I love talking about. I could talk about Galileo and Copernicus and Newton for a whole semester and never get tired of it. So we'll do a little bit of that. I think what I'm going to do for the summer is a sort of modified outside-in model. I want to start with talking about, first, how we know what we know about the universe. What are the tools available for astronomers and physicists to learn about stuff up in space? Because astronomy is a really, really unique science in that we very rarely get to directly touch or interact with the thing we're studying. If you're a geologist, you can go out in the field and dig up some rocks and bring them back to the lab and analyze them. If you're a chemist, you can mix some stuff up in beakers and touch it. Well, not all of it, but you can interact directly. You can do experiments where you're in charge of changing the stuff. If you're a biologist, you can go out and study plants and animals in the field. All astronomers get to do is look at stuff. That's all we get to do, is look at the light coming at us from stars and galaxies and planets, with a few little exceptions. I'm going to leave it, one of the first quizzes I'll give you is to think about what are the exceptions to that fact about astronomy, that we don't get to actually touch anything. So that means, in order to understand how we know things about space, we have to understand a little bit about the tools of astronomy and physics. How can looking at light tell us what things are made of, how far away they are, how old they are, what their temperature is? We can learn quite a bit about stuff in space just from these the information we can tease out of the light we receive from it. So we'll talk some about that. One of the reasons I'm not doing my standard inside-out approach over the summer is because there just wasn't enough time to get to the good stuff, which is talking about the Big Bang and cosmology, dark matter, and dark energy. So I don't want to not get to that because we're rushed at the end, so I want to do it at the beginning. So I'm going to kind of organize each week of the course thematically. 1 week we'll talk about galaxies. 1 week we'll talk about stars. 1 week we'll talk about planets. And I might not get to all the nitty-gritty little tiny details of, you know, every little fact about every little moon of every planet in the solar system, but that's okay. That's not important. You can open up the astronomy book, and if you're super interested in Venus, you can go read the Wikipedia entry on Venus and learn more than I could teach you in a whole semester about Venus. What's important to me in a class like this is that you get a broad overview of our modern astronomical and cosmological models of the universe, and that you get a grounding in understanding the tool set that scientists use in order to find out these things. Astronomy is a really fast changing field. I realized this a few semesters ago when I hadn't taught astronomy in about 6 years, because I was teaching at a high school where I did other stuff, 3D printing and programming and electronics and stuff, and I wasn't teaching regular science classes. But when I came back to teach an astronomy class, I realized being away from astronomy for 5 or 6 years, we've discovered all kinds of stuff that's in the textbooks now. If you think about like a Bio 101 class or a Chem 101 class or a Physics 101 class, the content of those 101 introductory, the first class you take in biology, chemistry, physics, doesn't really change much from year to year. And probably a physics, I won't talk about biology and chemistry because I'm not a biologist or chemist, but at least physics. A Physics 101 textbook in 2022 looks exactly like a Physics 101 textbook in 2002 and exactly like one I would have used in 1992. Because the basics haven't changed. An astronomy textbook from 2022 looks very different from one from 2002 and very different from one from 1982. We have learned a lot of stuff in the past 15 years. Astronomy textbooks change very, very quickly. That means it's not possible for me to teach you everything we know about astronomy, and it means that a lot of colleges and universities have taken the single astronomy class that they used to give as a standard to students taking a general science class. They've taken that class and they've cut it in half, and they do 2 classes. One class on stars and planets, and one class on galaxies and cosmology and the Big Bang. We're trying to squeeze it all into one class to talk about the small scale stuff like stars and planets and the big scale stuff like galaxies and cosmology. So we have to kind of skim along the surface of those topics a little bit and maybe not dive as deeply into some of the things as you would like. That's just kind of the nature of what astronomy is like right now. I can't teach you everything in the whole universe in 8 weeks. But we can learn some super interesting stuff about the universe as a whole, and the topics that we talk about in the class will probably lean a little more heavily towards the stuff that I happen to personally be interested in. I love talking about the early universe and cosmology and the Big Bang and what we know and what we do not know about the origin of the universe, which is as important as what we do know. And I love talking about the history of astronomy. I love talking about Galileo, Copernicus, and Newton. We probably won't do much of that. And I love talking about things like extraterrestrial life. Do we think there are other inhabited planets in the universe, both inhabited in the sense of simple single-celled organisms and bacteria and algae and little tiny living things that are alive, but maybe not as interesting as civilizations like ours with intelligence and spacecraft and things like that. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about what we think we know about the possibility of astrobiology. Obviously, we don't know the answer to that question yet, is there life in the universe anywhere but the Earth? But we hope to someday have an answer to that. So we'll talk about that as well. So that's just me giving an overview of how I plan to structure the class. When we look at the syllabus in another video, we'll talk about that in more detail. But for now, I'm just testing out my camera and microphone, testing out my light setup, testing out my green screen, which looks pretty good. I thought I was going to have to iron it, but it's working pretty well. So I'm going to tinker with this a little bit over the next few weeks. You might notice the sound quality changing in the first few videos as I change mics and stuff. But it's fun for me to mess around with the technology. And instead of just saving everything straight to Zoom, which I've been doing for the past few years, the problem with doing that is those videos are gone when the class is over. So the Zoom videos I recorded 2 semesters ago, I can't really use anymore. So I'm going to do these all, record them, add little title screens to them maybe, and upload them to YouTube. And then I'll have them to use when I teach the class in the fall and to use when I teach the class next summer. So I won't have to be reinventing the wheel every single time I teach the class. Anyway, that's the idea. Okay, I'm going to turn this around, figure out how to turn this off, go back into edit mode and see if I can get this thing up on YouTube.